going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, ready to talk some football with my buddy Justis Mosqueda. Justis, how are you? How was your draft weekend, bud?
It was long, but it was good,
Yeah.
especially day three. Day three, I think the Packers might have had the best day three of the draft, but I guess we'll see in a couple of years, right?
Oh, that's a bold statement. What brings you around to that opinion?
Ooh, so Dubs, I really like him, or
Me
Dobbs.
too.
I still can't say his name.
Well, here's the thing. He said Dobbs on the video, right? But there are like two people who covered him in college swear it's Dubs. So
I've
I'm
seen the
going with the kid
pronunciation
knowing
guide.
his own name, but
Yeah, it's
I
the
don't
same
know.
thing with Kingsley and Igbare, and then they're like,
Right.
no, he goes by JJ. I'm like, I've
JJ.
never seen him down by JJ before,
No,
so
well,
okay.
I know they get up at the podium and say he's JJ. He's JJ. It's fine by me. So wait, Dobbs, he is an intriguing prospect. I said on Packers Daily the other day, I kind of went into his tape on Saturday night, and that kid can play, man. Like no
Yeah, I
joke.
mean, I watched him in February once I realized like he's probably going to get drafted around this range. He has the size that the Packers typically look for at wide receiver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very smooth athlete. I think he's very athletic. You watch him even running, out routes and stuff, and you can see kind of the fluidity in his game. The one thing I kind of worry about, I mean, how many times has Matt LaFleur talked about, run blocking and all that stuff and how
We
much
talked
it
about it
matters at wide
again
receiver?
on Saturday afternoon. You betcha.
Right. And you can watch some of the film, and it is an air raid offense, so he is split outside a whole lot, and it's not like he's playing in the slot, so he's not asked to like crack down on safety, so he's lined up wide. The effort level isn't really there, so I wonder, how hard it is for him to kind of get that done.
Crank that up, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, he was plus 10,000 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. I put a little $5
You
bet
throw
down on
something on
that.
that? All right, good for
Yeah,
you. Good for
plus
you.
10,000, 1 out of 100 chance. I mean,
We're
there's a
tracking
one
that.
out of a
We are
hundred chance.
definitely tracking that this year. I love it.
Look, a 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 100 chance that that a wide receiver in a room that's very shallow in terms of depth, especially an outside receiver with a back-to-back MVP quarterback is going to
Target's
win
got to go
Rookie of the
somewhere,
Year.
right? Because
Yeah,
they're not going to suddenly turn into a power running team.
no, Aaron's not going to let that happen.
Never going to happen.
Please.
Not while Aaron's there. I love it. Well, okay, but who else on day three? Because that's the one, obviously, I think most people would probably gravitate to as far as a skill position player, obviously, who could potentially find playing time. But who else in that kind of day three range for the Packers intrigued you?
I like 5 other guys, like Zach Tom, the guy out of Wake Forest,
Right.
completely shut down Jermaine Johnson, the first round pass rusher out of Florida State, who went to the Jets. I really like him. He obviously has the potential to play either tackle or center. Very athletic. Kingsley and Igbare is a guy who people projected was going to go like 3 rounds earlier. One of my big knocks with the whole Christian Watson trade was, there were so many edge rushers on the board. And I think there was a lot of edge rusher depth, on day two of the draft that you don't necessarily see from a year basis. I was like, we basically traded a wide receiver and an edge rusher to move up for Christian Watson. Well, then all these wide receivers go off of the board. You look at where the Packers were sitting in the draft, and you're like, they probably would have taken Alec Pierce, who probably was, just as far away as Watson. And that was my big kind of knock. And then you can land an edge rusher like Enikbare, who's going to set the edge and, can do some of the Za'Darius Smith stuff. And you're like, all right, well, I could stomach, right? I could stomach that trade
Made
a
it a
little
little
bit
easier,
more. And
easier
then,
for you.
Rashid Walker, 7th round, guy that was talked about, potential round 3, round 4 pick. They end up grabbing him at 249. And then Samari Toure is another guy I liked. He was a FCS All-American at Montana. I remember watching him at Montana, Portland's finest. Ended up transferring
Nice.
up to Nebraska when they had some transfers going out, like
Right.
Wendell Robinson, the kid from Kentucky, transferred out of Nebraska. J.D. Spielman, Rick Spielman's son, actually transferred out of Nebraska, went to TCU, had to medically retire. They had some guys there. Toure came in because they needed bodies, did pretty well, play special teams, very athletic. So I think all those guys, have a chance to contribute. I think Walker is probably going to take a redshirt year. Toure is going to play on special teams, but I like all of those picks. I really do.
You want wide receivers going to come in on teams. Nebraska wide receiver is probably your best bet, as far as like being able to fill a body type, throw, guys aside and be able to get down there in coverage, things that,
I mean, there's
Packers
some
have been
clips of
lacking for a
Toure
while
playing
now.
fullback there with how much they did some like
Love
offense
it.
stuff
Yeah.
at Nebraska.
Put him in the
So.
backfield. I'm all in. Matt's down with that kind of thing. So
And Dobbs was a high school running back. He was like a wing T quarterback, 28 rushing
nice.
touchdowns. Didn't play wide receiver really until he got to college. So
I love that. Okay, well, let's get back to real quick the misgivings you had about, because I remember we did talk about it a little bit on day 2 of the draft about the jump up for Watson. And I hear what you're saying as far as possible the potential of grabbing Pierce later on, but it's clear. I mean, it's pretty obvious that they feel that he can be a superstar straight up. As far as his athleticism and the potential for growth with Pierce, I think. I mean, there's no knock on him as a prospect or as a future NFL player, but I don't see the same ceiling for Pierce as I do for Watson. I mean, I think that's where the desire to get up there and grab him probably comes from. We know the reports are they tried to get to 32, so that would have been 3 first-round picks, and essentially, I think they got 3 first-round picks because I think Watson athletically has the potential to be pretty fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think kind of the narrative is probably going to change about these first round picks. And is it more valuable to pick at 32 or 34 with the way you look at the fifth year options now that they're
Right.
based off of like, if you make a Pro Bowl or whatever, like it
Well,
might be
and
more valuable to not have a fifth year
exact. I was
option on
just
a
going to
guy
say, and
than
how
to have one.
quickly these guys now start talking about wanting to get a deal done sooner rather than later, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Kyler Murray is obviously a pretty dramatic example, but the expectation is if you come in and you play well, and you have to think, the hope is they do. Well, then, yeah, you're going to be tearing up that deal sooner rather than later anyway. So that 5th year option, hopefully, is kind of immaterial.
Yeah, the big thing for me at the time when I was talking on the stream with you,
Right.
it was still during round 2.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
th-
I
I
get it. I
think
totally get it.
well, no, no, no. So my perspective at the time was this is the end of the wide receiver run. I
Right.
didn't realize the wide receiver run was going to extend through day
Right.
2. Like
Right.
I didn't expect. Did anyone expect John Mechie to go that high? No, off of an ACL injury, he isn't a
Right.
great athlete, pretty small dude. Like he was a guy people were talking about as a potential 4th round pick. Ends up going that high. I think my perspective was really like a Tyquan Thornton is out there, and I think in terms of deep threats, he's probably as good as Watson in terms of just doing that one specific thing, right? That
Right.
one specific thing. I thought you could have gotten him at 53 or whatever the Packers would have sat back.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't end up being true. I mean, I have a pretty
That
good
run
source.
went quick. It was funny because we thought it was going to happen at the top of the round, but it happened kind of mid to late of part of the round, and they but it happened like that. Like he
Yes,
just
I mean,
flew off the board.
I have a pretty good source. The Indianapolis Colts tried to trade back and basically grab Tyquan Thornton, right?
Really?
They got jumped by the
Mm-hmm.
Patriots, and they're sitting there at the pick that the Packers had originally held, and they end up taking Alec Pierce. So, like, some of these things, like Goot had a better handle on when the wide receiver run was going to happen than me. Like, they were going to have to
Yeah.
trade up for a wide receiver no matter what, whether it was Watson or someone else. They grabbed Watson, whatever. At this point, I still think the process in terms of how much they gave up for Watson wasn't worth that specific selection, right? Like they basically gave up a 3rd-round pick for free in
Right.
an early 3rd-round pick for free in value relative to that trade. But I mean, if you can add the guys that they added on day 3, I mean, I really do truly believe that like this is one of the best draft classes out there.
Well, I've been saying on the channel here for the last 2 days, it's like I'm notoriously the guy who says you got to wait and see, wait till they get on the grass and compete against NFL talent. But I'm having a real hard time not getting excited about this draft class. I mean, top to bottom. And I tell you, we haven't even touched on the first rounders yet. I'm
Oh
kind of,
yeah, by the way, they drafted 2
I
guys
mean,
from the national
seriously, I'm
championship defense.
fascinated by these 2 additions as far as the fact that he let the board fall to him and he got these 2 guys who could potentially, and that's all it is potential, but potentially become, I mean, Walker especially, I don't think people realize like his sideline to sideline ability, the pure speed that he is going to add to this defense, and the fact that they don't have to worry about shuttling guys in and out for all these sub packages. I mean, obviously there will be sub. That's not going anywhere. But the flexibility he gives them within this personnel group with him and Campbell on the field together is so exciting. I have trouble containing myself.
Yeah, and you kind of look at what they did last year. They were kind of interesting, right? Because they played kind of 2 different nickel looks. They had the penny
Right.
stuff, which was like think of like a 3-4 defense minus one of the inside linebackers, right? And they just cover everyone up with just big bodies, right? 3 defensive tackles, 2 edge rushers, 1 inside guy. They did a lot with that with Campbell when they were kind of trying to find themselves in terms of their nickel defense when they were
Right.
adding in, Jalen Smith and
I know.
early in the
There was that
season, Ty
4-week
Summers was
stretch
getting
where,
looks.
there was Ty Summers was in there. Burks got time. It was like there
Mhm.
was a 3-4 week stretch where it was like, let's try everything and see
It
what
was like
works
we're going
best.
against the Bears. They can't compete against us. Let's just
Let's
experiment a
just
little
see
bit.
what happens. That's
So
so true,
there
though.
was that, and then they started with Barnes. They end with Barnes.
Mhm.
Barnes probably was one of their weaker links in terms of the starting defense. I don't think that's a controversial take, by any
Not at all.
extent. So now if they can go into a nickel look and you got Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, on the inside, on the edges, you got Preston Rashawn, and outside or inside backer, you got Walker and Campbell. That's a pretty good look. So they can get into their like true like 4-2 stuff, and then they can get into 5-1 looks. They did a little bit of it with Campbell on the
Campbell,
edge.
yeah.
Quay can do it a little bit too. So I just think that like last year they weren't comfortable in getting into that stuff when if Campbell's on the edge, that means Barnes is playing sideline to sideline. I don't know if they were comfortable with that, and the way that they ended up playing those guys and kind of deploying the personnel didn't look like it. But now that they have these guys, like they kind of dictated when they're coming out of the huddle, right? Or not even out of the
Right.
huddle, off of the sideline.
Yep.
You're saying, hey, we're going to be in this 5-1 look. Hey, we're going to be in this 4-2 look. And now, if you can get into those looks out of your base nickel personnel, they don't know what you're coming out in, and who knows?
Exactly.
You're out there. Campbell's on the edge. You only have two defensive tackles. Maybe Gary's playing nose tackle, head up on the center, and you're pass rushing out of
Especially
the
in those third
3rd and
downs.
6. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yep.
exactly. So
100%.
I think that is probably kind of the more underrated aspect of it. But I mean, you got two guys out of the best college football defense we've ever seen.
I mean,
Incredibly athletic. Number 1 inside linebacker in the class, in my opinion. Number 2 defensive lineman. And what's not to like? I mean, this is a classic Packers thing. I know people talk about, they haven't invested at inside linebacker, and that's very true. But if they're going to invest in a guy, it looks like this, right? We heard all the rumblings of them looking after a guy like Miles Jack a couple years ago, right? Like
right.
this is a pretty similar player to him.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's fun. It is funny though how the lead up to this draft, somebody hit reply all on Walker because suddenly, like 4 or 5 days before the draft, there were like 3 or 4 prominent national people who suddenly mocked him to the Packers. Somebody knew something somewhere. I
I
don't know
mean,
who.
I feel like I knew something weeks before the draft. We had talked about, not to plug too much, but
Right.
at APC we had talked about this entire draft process. I'm like, Quay Walker is being talked about as a round 3 guy. I like him the best out of all these Georgia linebackers. And 2 weeks before the draft, everyone ends up agreeing. It's the same thing with Paschal. I mean, not to talk too much in
Right.
division, but like that kid out of Kentucky who's a pass rusher reminds me a lot of Za'Darius Smith. He was a guy who's not for everyone because you want to move him all across the line of scrimmage. You don't just want to hang him out on the edge. So he's not for everyone, and that's probably why he didn't go in the first round. But he went early second to the Detroit Lions. People talked about him as a 4th-round pick until 2 weeks before draft week, and I'm like, did anyone watch the film? He was kicking SEC dudes' butts. Like, I want that guy.
Um, Getting back to the offensive side of the ball, we were talking obviously about the receivers. It's been the narrative all offseason. It probably will be all offseason going into the regular season. How do you see the division of labor here? I mean, obviously a pickup could still happen. I don't think they probably do much of anything. I think this is the group they're going to roll into the season with. If that is the case, how do you see this splitting up? Because obviously Watkins is somewhat almost at this point because of the draft, all the hype around it. It's like people almost forget that the Packers signed him. But I think he could be a pretty significant contributor, especially as they're bringing along these 3 young guys.
I think the problem with Watkins is just the numbers, right? So I think it really could get to a spot where, for Watkins, especially considering the fact that he's not really going to be playing special teams like that moving forward,
Exactly. Right.
if he can't beat out Dobbs for an outside receivers position, in terms of being a starter, he
Right.
might not make the team. I mean, it's kind of like a
His
binary, right?
his
Like if you're not
contract
starting,
certainly
you're
makes
not
it
worth
easy.
it.
Right. And his contract makes it easy to do that, right? They signed him for peanuts. So it's not
Right.
like it's a major hit if they have to cut him.
I think the way it works out is probably on base downs. You're probably getting something like, and obviously these guys need a practice, so we're kind of projecting a little bit. But
Right.
I think 2 wide receiver sets. They're probably going to get Watkins and Lazard out there. I think Cobb will probably replace Lazard on 3rd downs. We saw that a whole ton, in
Yep.
previous years. And then if they're in trip sets, I think Dubs comes off the bench. Dobbs comes off. I'm just switching
Who
every time.
knows? We'll find out soon enough.
I think
Hopefully.
Dobbs comes off the bench and probably plays outside to kind of free up those guys on the inside. Or Watkins, right? I mean, it's
Right.
really a change of one of those two. I think Toure getting drafted is probably real bad news for a guy like Malik Taylor. I think it's probably not great to be a Juwan Winfrey
Juwan
either.
Winfrey, Malik Taylor, those guys got their
I
work cut
mean,
out for them,
the
no
other
doubt.
thing too is they added so many bodies. Amari Rogers is gonna have to win his camp spot. I mean, this is a real deal competition for just playing time
Oh,
at
I
wide
don't doubt
receiver
it. I do not doubt it. I mean, I do think they'll put him out there to compete, but I
for sure.
I have
Yeah.
I have trouble believing he's in trouble. so to speak.
They're only gonna. How many roster spots can
I
they
know.
have?
I hear
They
you.
got they
I
got
hear you.
14 wide receivers in camp, and
I
Aaron
know.
Rodgers isn't gonna throw in OTAs. I don't
I,
understand how these guys are all gonna get touches.
I hear you. Well, and they got the kid from Wisconsin. Come on now. That guy's going to
Oh,
get a look. He's
oh
going to be a
yeah.
hometown hero by the end of the offseason. There's
I
no doubt
saw
about it.
he plays a bunch of special teams reps, so I'm just expecting it at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have to. Looking at obviously the schedule's coming out. We don't know how it lays out yet, but it's going to be interesting to watch how everything gels on offense. Do you think there's a major shift as far as I know everybody talks about how much Rodgers was Devontae centric. That certainly was the case in the playoff game. We all know we saw it the last couple of years, etc. But then there's also all of the evidence in the games that Devontae missed about their ability to be multiple and Aaron to spread the ball around. Do you think it's that simple? Do you think they go the route of like everything we saw in like Arizona last year or Dallas a couple of years ago, the games that Devontae was out? Or do you think there's a major retooling here because of so many new faces and places?
Well, the big thing for me is the run game, right? I think you look at the run game, and so much of it was just like a lot of zone with Devontae backside. He can run a bubble all
Right.
by himself. It's not even like he has to have anyone block for him, or just run a little hitch route and off coverage and just get him the ball because it's like a truck and trailer drill just on the sideline. He's almost like a
Right.
running back like that. I don't think Rodgers has a guy who's going to eat snaps like that on the backside of runs. So
Right.
I wonder if they do more zone stuff or, especially with Tunyon out, right, to start the season. We saw a lot of DeGuara, coming out of the backfield or,
A lot of H-back stuff, yeah.
yeah, a lot
Definitely.
of that. And, they're running, you could turn on, the Bears game when they were running that bear front and just stacking, defensive tackles on the inside and they're just running counter and power over and over again. I wonder if they get into like, I guess it's like gap runs is the best way to explain it,
Right.
pulling guards and stuff like that, which is not really what you kind of like RPO or package play stuff off of. So that's the thing I would look at early, but I don't think we're going to get an indication of that, in the preseason or anything,
No,
because
right.
if Rodgers isn't out there and you're not scheming anything against the defense, how are you going to know until, week one and the bullets are live? So I think that's probably going to be something we monitor early on in the season. And who knows if that changes when if you're pulling guards Elton Jenkins and your tight end is Robert Tunyon, does that change things for you, right? So like that's probably something that's going to evolve through the first 2 months of the season.
Final thing for you here on this coming off the draft. We're all very excited about it, but we're talking about Aaron Rodgers potentially, most likely, not being there for much of the offseason work. Now, obviously, they'll hit the grass running, so to speak, when camp starts. Are you surprised that Jordan Love wasn't dealt over this past weekend?
Not really. I mean, look at the quarterbacks, right? We had Malik Willis potentially mocked at, second overall a couple
Right.
weeks before the draft, and he ends up falling to the third round.
Right.
Jimmy Garoppolo can't get moved. Baker Mayfield can't get moved. It seems like quarterbacks really is like a game of musical chairs, right? And once someone's got one, it's just a done deal. Like they just stop looking, and I think teams were just done looking. They had their guys, right or wrong. If you think Sam Darnold is the guy in Carolina or Washington's guy and Carson Wentz, that's their team.
Right.
They're going to ride with them this season. So I'm not surprised. I did think, Goody talking about it in the presser was funny because
Yeah.
they basically asked him like, did you get calls for Jordan Love? And he said, like, if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
Tell you
It's
guys.
like, oh, okay, so yes, but
So that's a yes then. Okay, very good.
so I'm not surprised, but I mean, he's a controlled contract. I know he's pretty high in terms of like the salary relative to where everyone else is, just because everyone else's like actual salary,
Right.
not just pure cash and converted to bonus, cap space, all that, but his pure salary is actually pretty relatively high just because they haven't converted it because you end up taking the dead cap if you end up trading him. But he is a cost controlled guy. I mean, looking at backup quarterbacks, they're making like $6 million a year plus across the league. It's not bad to have him in the pocket. Plus, I mean, we forget like if Mason Crosby makes a couple field goals, Jordan Love takes Patrick Mahomes into overtime last year. It's fine with developing him, I think.
I agree.
So
I'm
it
with you
is
on
what
that
it
one.
is. It just he's going to be there for a while. Benker's going to keep playing on the practice
Banker's
squad and
gonna
post the stuff on
put
Twitter.
the
It's
heat
cool.
on this summer, baby. Just wait. Just wait. I love Kurt.
I'm worried about their arms. I really am. They have 14 wide receivers. They got like 3 quarterbacks. I'm
They'll bring
scared.
someone in. Come on, it doesn't hurt. They'll bring someone in for a camp arm if they really need to. You know that.
Yeah,
I
we'll
mean,
see.
we'll see.
They're at
They're at 90
uh
now, right?
They're at 89, so they got
Okay.
one
See,
spot
so they got a spot. They're
before
fine.
rookie camp this
There you
weekend.
go.
So
Maybe they'll bring in a rookie tryout QB, and have him stick around. You never know. Justice, I can't thank you enough for hanging out and talking some football with me, man. Check out his work at ACME Packing Company. Justice, a pleasure as always.
yes, sir. Anytime.